Part 2 of My Buried Treasure by Richard Harding Davies. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Carolyn. Part 2. It was a day in early October. The haze of Indian summer was in the air, and as we crossed the North River by the 23rd Street ferry, the sun flashed upon the white clouds overhead and the tumbling waters below. On each side of us great vessels with the blue peter at the fore lay at the wharves ready to cast off, or were already nosing their way down the channel towards strange and beautiful ports. Lamport and Holt were rolling down to Rio, the Royal Mail's Magdalena, no longer white and gold, was off to Kingston, where once 7 pirates swung in chains. The Clyde was on her way to Haiti, where the buccaneers came from. The Morro Castle was bound for Havana, which Morgan, king of all the pirates, had once made his own, and the Red D was steaming to Porto Cabello, where Sir Francis Drake, as big a buccaneer as any of them, lies entombed in her harbor. And I was setting forth on a buried treasure expedition on a snub-nosed, flat-bellied, fresh-water ferry-boat bound for New Jersey. No one will ever know my sense of humiliation. And when the Italian boy insulted my immaculate tan shoes by pointing at them and saying, "Shine," I could have slain him. Fancy digging for buried treasure in freshly varnished boots! But Edgar did not mind. To him there was nothing lacking. It was just as it should be. He was deeply engrossed in calculating how many offices were for rent in the Singer Building. When we reached the other side, he refused to answer any of my eager questions. He would not let me know even for what place on the line he had purchased our tickets, and as a hint that I should not disturb him, he stuffed into my hands the latest magazines. "At least tell me this," I demanded. "Have you ever been to this place before today?" "Once," said Edgar shortly. "Last week. That's when I found out I would need someone with me who could dig." "How do you know it's the right place?" I whispered. The summer season was over, and of the chair car we were the only occupants, but before he answered, Edgar looked cautiously around him and out of the window. We had just passed Red Bank. "Because the map told me," he answered. "Suppose," he continued fretfully, "you had a map of New York City with the streets marked on it plainly. Suppose the map said that if you walked to where Broadway and Fifth Avenue meet, you would find the Flatiron Building. Do you think you could find it?" "Was it as easy as that?" I gasped. "It was as easy as that," said Edgar. I sank back into my chair and let the magazines slide to the floor. What fiction story was there in any one of them so enthralling as the actual possibilities that lay before me? In 2 hours I might be bending over a pot of gold, a sea chest stuffed with pearls and rubies. I began to recall all the stories I had heard as a boy of treasure buried along the coast by Kidd on his return voyage from the Indies. Where along the Jersey sea line were there safe harbors? The train on which we were racing south had its rail head at Barnegat Bay, and between Barnegat and Red Bank there now was but one other inlet, that of the Manasquan River. It might be Barnegat, it might be Manasquan. It could not be a great distance from either, towards the ocean down a broad sandy road. The season had passed, and the windows of the cottages and bungalows on either side of the road were barricaded with planks. On the verandas, hammocks abandoned to the wind hung in tatters. On the back porches the doors of empty refrigerators swung open on one hinge, and on every side above the fields of gorgeous goldenrod rose signs heading "For Rent." When we had progressed in silence for a mile, the sandy avenue lost itself in the deeper sand of the beach, and the horse of his own will came to a halt. On one side we were surrounded by locked and deserted bathing-houses, on the other by empty pavilions shuttered and barred against the winter, but still inviting one to try our salt-water taffy or to keep cool with an ice-cream soda. Rupert turned and looked inquiringly at Edgar. To the north the beach stretched in an unbroken line to Manasquan Inlet. To the south, 3 miles away, we could see floating on the horizon, like a mirage, the hotels and summer cottages of Bay Head. "Drive toward the inlet," directed Edgar. "This gentleman and I will walk." Relieved of our weight, the horse stumbled bravely into the trackless sand, while below on the damper and firmer shingle we walked by the edge of the water. The tide was coming in, and the spent waves, spreading before them an advance guard of tiny shells and pebbles, threatened our boots, and at the same time in soothing, lazy whispers warned us of their attack. These lisping murmurs and the crash and roar of each incoming wave as it broke were the only sounds. And on the beach we were the only human figures. At last the scene began to bear some resemblance to one set for an adventure. The rolling ocean, a coast steamer dragging a great column of black smoke, and cast high upon the beach the wreck of a schooner, her masts tilting drunkenly, gave colour to our purpose. It became filled with greater promise of drama, more picturesque. I began to thrill with excitement. I regarded Edgar appealingly, in eager supplication. At last he broke the silence that was torturing me. "We will now walk higher up," he commanded. "If we get our feet wet, we may take cold." My spirit was too far broken to make a reply, but to my relief I saw that in leaving the beach Edgar had some second purpose. With each heavy step he was drawing toward 2 high banks of sand in a hollow behind which, protected by the banks, were 3 stunted, wind-driven pines. His words came back to me. So many what-you-may-call-ems. Were these pines the 3 somethings from something, the what-you-may-call-ems? The thought chilled me to the spine. I gazed at them fascinated. I felt like falling on my knees in the sand and tearing their secret from them with my bare hands. I was strong enough to dig them up by the roots, strong enough to dig the Panama Canal. I glanced tremulously at Edgar. His eyes were wide open and eloquent with dismay. His lower jaw had fallen. He turned and looked at me for the first time with consideration. Apology and remorse were written in every line of his countenance. "I'm sorry," he stammered. I had a cruel premonition. I exclaimed with distress. "You have lost the map!" I hissed. "No, no," protested Edgar, "but I entirely forgot to bring any lunch." With violent mutterings I tore off my upper and outer garments and tossed them into the hack. "Where do I begin?" I asked. Edgar pointed to a spot inside the triangle formed by the three trees, and equally distant from each. "Put that horse behind the bank," I commanded, "where no one can see him, and both you and Rupert keep off the skyline." From the north and south we were now all three hidden by the two high banks of sand. To the east lay the beach and the Atlantic Ocean, and to the west stretches of marshes that a mile away met a wood of pine trees and the railroad roundhouse. I began to dig. I knew that weary hours lay before me, and I attacked the sand leisurely and with deliberation. It was at first no great effort, but as the hole grew in depth and the roots of the trees were exposed, the work was sufficient for several men. Still, as Edgar had said, it is not every day that one can dig for treasure, and in thinking of what was to come, I forgot my hands that quickly blistered and my breaking back. After an hour I insisted that Edgar should take a turn, but he made such a poor headway that my patience could not contain me, and I told him I was sufficiently rested and would continue. With alacrity he scrambled out of the hole, and taking a cigar from my case, seated himself comfortably in the hack. I took my comfort in anticipating the thrill that would be mine when the spade would ring on the iron-bound chest, when, with a blow of the axe, I would expose to view the hidden jewels, the pieces of 8 coated with verdigris, the string of pearls, the chains of yellow gold. Edgar had said $1 million. That must mean there would be diamonds, many diamonds. I would hold them in my hands, watch them, at the sudden sunshine blink their eyes and burst into tiny, burning fires. In imagination I would replace them in the setting from which, years before, they had been stolen. I would try to guess whence they came, from a jeweled chalice in some dim cathedral, from the breast of a great lady, from the hilt of an admiral's sword. After an hour I lifted my aching shoulders and, wiping the sweat from my eyes, looked over the edge of the hole. Rupert, with his back to the sand-hill, was asleep. Edgar, with one hand, was waving away the mosquitoes, and in the other was holding one of the magazines he had bought on the way down. I could even see the page upon which his eyes were riveted. It was an advertisement for breakfast food. In my indignation the spade slipped through my cramped and perspiring fingers, and as it struck the bottom of the pit, something, a band of iron, a steel lock, an iron ring, gave forth a muffled sound. My heart stopped beating as suddenly as though Mr. Corbett had hit it with his closed fist. My blood turned to melted ice. I drove the spade down as fiercely as though it was a dagger. It sank into rotten wood. I had made no sound, for I could hardly breathe. But the slight noise of the blow had reached Edgar. I heard the springs of the hack creak as he vaulted from it, and the next moment he was towering above me, peering down into the pit. His eyes were wide with excitement, greed, and fear. In his hands he clutched the 2 suitcases. Like a lion defending his cubs, he glared at me. "Get out!" he shouted. "Like hell!" I said. "Get out!" he roared. "I'll do the rest. That's mine, not yours. Get out!" With a swift kick I brushed away the sand. I found I was standing on a squat wooden box bound with bands of rusty iron. I had only to stoop to touch it. It was so rotten that I could have torn it apart with my bare hands. Edgar was dancing on the edge of the pit, incidentally kicking sand into my mouth and nostrils. "You promised me!" he roared. "You promised to obey me!" "You ass!" I shouted. "Haven't I done all the work? Don't I get—" "You get out!" roared Edgar. Slowly, disgustedly, with what dignity one can display in crawling out of a sand-pit, I scrambled to the top. "Go over there," commanded Edgar, pointing, "and sit down." In furious silence I seated myself beside Rupert. He was still slumbering and snoring happily. From where I sat I could see nothing of what was going forward in the pit, save once, when the head of Edgar, his eyes aflame and his hair and eye-glasses sprinkled with sand, appeared above it. Apparently he was fearful lest I had moved from the spot where he had placed me. I had not, but had he known my inmost feelings, he would have taken the axe into the pit with him. I must have sat so for half an hour. In the sky above me a fish-hawk drifted lazily. From the beach sounded the steady beat of the waves, and from the town across the marshes came the puffing of a locomotive and the clanging bells of the freight trains. The breeze from the sea cooled the sweat on my aching body, but it could not cool the rage in my heart. If I had the courage of my feelings, I would have cracked Edgar over head with the spade, buried him in the pit, bribed Rupert, and forever after lived happily on my ill-gotten gains. That was how Kidd or Morgan or Blackbeard would have acted. I cursed the effete civilization which had taught me to want many pleasures, but had left me with a conscience that would not let me take human life to obtain them, not even Edgar's life. In half an hour a suitcase was lifted into view and dropped on the edge of the pit. It was followed by the other, and then by Edgar. Without asking me to help him, because he probably knew I would not, he shovelled the sand into the hole and then placed the suitcases into the carriage. With increasing anger I observed that the contents of each were so heavy that to lift it he used both hands. "There is no use your asking any questions," he announced, "because I won't answer them." I gave him minute directions as to where he could go, but instead we drove in black silence to the station. There Edgar rewarded Rupert with a dime, and while we waited for the train to New York, placed the two suitcases against the wall of the ticket office and sat upon them. When the train arrived he warned me in a hoarse whisper that I had promised to help him guard the treasure, and gave me one of the suitcases. It weighed a ton. Just to spite Edgar, I had a plan to kick it open, so that everyone on the platform might scramble for the contents. But again my infernal New England conscience restrained me. Edgar had secured the drawing-room in the parlor car, and when we were safely inside and the door bolted, my curiosity became stronger than my pride. "Edgar," I said, "your ingratitude is contemptible. Your suspicions are ridiculous, but under these most unusual conditions I don't blame you. But you are quite safe now. The door is fastened," I pointed out ingratiatingly. "It and this train doesn't stop for another 40 minutes. I think this would be an excellent time to look at the treasure." "I don't," said Edgar. I sank back into my chair. With intense enjoyment I imagined the train in which we were seated hurling itself into another train, and everybody, including Edgar, or rather, especially Edgar, being instantly but painlessly killed. By such an act of all-wise Providence I would at once become heir to $1,000,000. It was a beautiful, satisfying dream. Even my conscience accepted it with a smug smile. It was so vivid a dream that I sat guiltily expectant, waiting for the crash to come, for the shrieks and screams, for the rush of escaping steam and breaking window panes. But it was far too good to be true. Without a jar the train carried us and its precious burden into safety to the Jersey City terminal. And each, with $500,000 in his hand, hurried to the ferry, assailed by porters, newsboys, hackmen. To them we were a couple of commuters, saving a dime by carrying our own handbags. It was now 6 o'clock, and I pointed out to Edgar that at that hour the only vaults open were those of the Night and Day Bank, and to that institution in a taxicab we at once made our way. I paid the chauffeur, and 2 minutes later, with a gasp of relief and rejoicing, I dropped the suitcase I had carried on a table in the steel-walled fastnesses of the vaults. Gathered excitedly around us were the officials of the bank, summoned hastily from above, and watchmen in plain clothes and watchmen in uniforms of gray. Great bars as thick as my leg protected us. Walls of chilled steel rising from solid rock stood between our treasure and the outer world. Until then I had not known how tremendous the nervous strain had been, but now it came home to me. I mopped my perspiration from my forehead. I drew a deep breath. "Edgar," I exclaimed happily, "I congratulate you." I found Edgar extending towards me a $2 bill. "You gave the chauffeur $2," he said. "The fare was really only $1.80, so you owe me 20 cents." Mechanically I laid 2 dimes upon the table. "All the other expenses," continued Edgar, "which I agreed to pay, I have paid." He made a peremptory gesture. "I won't detain you any longer," he said. "Good night." "Good night!" I cried. "Don't I see the treasure?" Against the walls of chilled steel my voice rose like that of a tortured soul. "Don't I touch it?" I yelled. "Don't I even get a squint?" Even the watchmen looked sorry for me. "You do not," said Edgar calmly. "You have fulfilled your part of the agreement. I have fulfilled mine. A year from now you can write the story." As I moved in a dazed state towards the steel door, his voice halted me. "And you can say in your story," called Edgar, "that there is only one way to get a buried treasure. That is to go and get it." End of Part 2. End of My Buried Treasure by Richard Harding Davies. Recorded by Carolyn in September 2012 in Groningen in the Netherlands. Thank you for listening.